you need an in-house finance team, or is outsourcing a smarter choice? In today's video, we're going to consider two things. Firstly, what's the true cost of your finance team? And the second area is around what are the factors to consider when you're looking around outsourcing your finance team or doing it in-house. Let's firstly have a look at the costs around your finance team. First thing to consider when you are potentially making a hiring decision, when you're looking to bring in outside help with your finance team, is around what skill sets you're going to need. So typically businesses, they start, they need the basics done. Normally the basics around bookkeeping. So normally the first decision companies will make, or directors will make, will be, shall we hire a bookkeeper? What we often see though is that they go out and they hire a bookkeeper, and then they ask that bookkeeper to do a lot more than just bookkeeping. So perhaps they ask them to do a set of management accounts, perhaps they ask them to join management meetings. And quite often we see that skill set then becomes a bit stretched, because frankly you're putting a person that is trained bookkeeper in a situation that they're not potentially qualified to do. The other sort of scenario we often see is people go out and they hire a finance manager or a finance controller, and then they ask them to do the bookkeeping. And again, you're paying for an expensive resource to do a bookkeeping role. So quite often what we see is when people are hiring from outside, they're potentially putting the wrong type of skills into those roles. So it's really important, when you're looking at hiring externally, they're getting the right roles or the right skills for that role. Otherwise you risk frankly losing money. It's going to cost you money because you're hiring the wrong people into those roles. And you also might have a situation where people leave the business because they're doing a role or a job that frankly they're not comfortable doing. So that's the first thing to consider. The other thing to consider when you're outsourcing is around the pure cost. So to hire an external resource, so to hire somebody externally, it's an expensive business. You've got recruitment fees when you hire them, potentially. You've got to think about their base salary, but you also got to think about the other costs as well. So there's costs of national insurance. National insurance is now 15%. Employers' national insurance is now 15%. And you've got to think about pension costs. The employer's element of that is now 3%. So straight away you've got two costs there you've got to think about on top of your base salary. But you've also got a lot of other costs as well in there. So you've got training costs. So someone's got to train those people in-house. You've got to think about managing those people. So potentially they're going to need a line manager. And you also got to think about things like holidays as well. So they're going to have at least the minimum statutory holidays that are going to apply to those roles. So all of those things need to be considered when you're looking at the overall cost of doing an in-house finance department. When you're comparing that with an external finance provider, then really the cost components are, I guess, more straightforward. You can understand straight away how much that person is going to cost you to bring into your business if you're using a third-party provider, because they're going to, most of them are going to give you a fixed cost. They're going to say, look, this is how much it's going to cost you each month for your finance department. The other thing they're potentially going to get with that finance function is different skill sets. So you can decide, or you and the outsourced provider can decide what is best for your business. And normally what is best is a combination of those skills. So you're going to need some processing skills, so you're going to need some bookkeeping skills. But on top of that, you're potentially going to need some higher level skills. So you might need a management accountant. You might even need a finance director to look at your finance strategy. So all of those elements are expensive if you buy them externally. So the cost of a finance director, well, you're well into six figures quite quickly. But if you're using an outsourced provider, then you can bring in those skills as and when you need them. So you're not paying for them all the time. Effectively then you're sharing that cost really. So that outsourced provider will be using those resources across a range of different businesses. So it's effectively the costs are shared. So the individual business doesn't have to wear the cost of all of those different skill sets, but they can still access those skills as and when they need them. So that's the key thing about an outsourced provider. So what are the sort of trends that we're seeing around sort of outsourcing, and what are the sort of key considerations, key things to think about when you're thinking about outsourcing? Well, firstly, technology. Technology has really moved on. The last 10 years, digital accounting has moved fundamentally now. In the old days, your finance team was typically sat in an office, your computing was done on a desktop in the office, And therefore everything was kind of office based. Now what we're seeing is, the trend is very much more around, hybrid working. People are, most operators now are operating on the cloud, and most accounting systems are sitting on the cloud, and therefore those systems can be accessed potentially anywhere in the world. So that gives a lot more freedom, and that then makes an outsource option, potentially more attractive, because you don't need people in the office, so you don't need to spend money on office space anymore. That outsource provider can effectively work from anywhere, do your accounts, and also share with you applications, so you can see what is going on in your accounting systems too. So you can both be looking at the same data at the same time, and frankly discussing that information, drawing conclusions, making decisions around what that information is actually telling you. So that's what you can do with an outsource finance provider. So that's one of sort of the key trends that we're seeing, this whole advent of outsourced computing. AI as well is also having a big impact now as well around the ability to use remote finance teams. And what AI is really doing at the moment is supporting those people to be more effective in those jobs. So some of that sort of heavy data lifting is now done by AI, and that's brilliant, because what that's doing is freeing up the finance professionals then, so they can actually be having a more detailed look at your numbers, drawing opinions on those numbers, and then having those conversations around those with you as the business owner, and then hopefully adding more value rather than getting caught up in the day-to-day processing. So those are sort of some of the key sort of trends that we're seeing with that whole outsourcing finance function. So hopefully that's given you some insights into outsourcing your finance team. If this has been useful, please like and subscribe to our channel.